Today, we're going to dig into a really fundamental question about our health. How does the food we eat actually interact with our body's incredibly powerful hormonal systems? It's a story all about a delicate balance and, what happens when we push that balance way past its limits. So, to kick things off, let's just start with a single number.
Okay, just look at this. 5 grams. What do you think that represents? Maybe the sugar in a piece of fruit? A tiny sip of soda? Go ahead, take a guess. Because the answer is pretty wild, and it's absolutely central to our story today.
Yup, that's it. 5 grams, that's about 1 single teaspoon of sugar, is all the glucose an average adult has floating around in their entire blood supply at any given time to be healthy. Our body works incredibly hard, 24/7, to keep that number right there. It's this beautiful, precise system.
All right, now let's look at another number. 250 grams. And get this isn't what someone eats in a week. For a whole lot of people, this is just a Tuesday.
This is what a pretty typical day of eating carbs looks like in our modern world. So think about that for a second. We're asking our body, which is designed to meticulously manage 1 single teaspoon of sugar in the blood, to somehow process a flood of sugar that is 50 times that amount every single day.
So that leads to the really big questions, right? How in the world does our body handle this massive daily tidal wave of glucose without just completely short-circuiting? And maybe more importantly, what happens when this amazing, finely tuned system starts to get strained, when it gets overwhelmed? Well, this brings us to the main character in our story, insulin.
To deal with all that incoming sugar, our pancreas releases a hormone called insulin. You can think of insulin as the traffic cop for blood sugar. Its job is to get that sugar out of the bloodstream and safely into our cells to be used for energy. But what happens when it's rush hour 24/7?
Well, you end up with a condition called hyperinsulinemia. And all that really means is that your pancreas is forced into overdrive, just pumping out more and more insulin to try to keep your blood sugar from spiking to dangerous levels. Your body is basically in a constant state of hormonal alarm.
And what's so fascinating is this insight from cardiologist Dr. Pradeep Jamnadas. He argues that it's not just about eating a high-carb meal. It's the frequency. It's the constant snacking, the grazing, the 6 small meals a day. That pattern means insulin never gets a break. It's always high, always on duty. This all leads to a classic chicken or the egg debate in medicine. Does the body first become resistant to insulin's message, which then forces the pancreas to shout louder by pumping out more? Or does the chronically high level of insulin itself cause our cells to become resistant in the first place?
So for a long time, the conventional view has been that our cells, for whatever reason, just become resistant, and the body's response is to produce more insulin. But this emerging perspective completely flips that script. It suggests that the constant flood of insulin, that hyperinsulinemia, is actually the first thing to go wrong. Our cells, trying to protect themselves from the toxic effects of too much glucose, basically start plugging their ears to insulin's signal. They build a wall, becoming resistant as a defense mechanism.
Now, to really get a grip on this, we have to rewind the clock a bit. Because all our current dietary advice, it's actually a pretty recent experiment. For a very long time, the way we thought about metabolic problems was radically different.
Think about it. Before we had insulin as a medicine, before 1921, doctors only had one real tool to manage diabetes: diet. And their approach was just common sense. If the body can't handle sugar, then you stop putting so much sugar into the body.
And this just brilliantly illustrates that dramatic shift. Look, as far back as 1797, doctors were successfully using very low-carb diets. But then, bam, 1921, the discovery of insulin changes everything. The focus moves away from food and toward managing the disease with a drug. Fast forward to the 1980s, and we're officially telling people to eat high-carb, low-fat diets. It's only in the last few years that we're seeing this full-circle moment, where major organizations are finally saying, hey, maybe restricting carbs is a valid approach after all.
Okay, so what happens when we dust off this old playbook and try it out today? Well, researchers are starting to look at how dramatically cutting carbs might affect not just diabetes, but a whole range of modern, chronic, inflammatory diseases.
So let's look at this really fascinating case series from just this year, 2024. It followed 10 patients with severe inflammatory bowel disease, things like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. They were put on a very low-carb, mostly animal-based diet. The idea was to see if taking out the carbs and most of the plant fiber could finally calm down their inflamed guts.
The results were, they were just staggering. Look at these quality of life scores. Before the diet, the average score was 95 out of a possible 224. That means these people were really suffering. On the diet, that average score jumped to 216. That's not just a little improvement. That's going from severe disease to what is essentially complete remission, all based on how the patients themselves felt. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Listen to this, from someone we'll call Patient TH, who had suffered with Crohn's for decades. To forget that you have a chronic disease, that is just such a profound statement about the level of relief they felt.
And here's another one. Think about the words this person, patient BL, chose. Resurrected my future. This goes so far beyond just managing symptoms. This speaks to getting your hope back, getting your life back, when you thought it was gone for good.
And finally, this quote from patient E, this one really gets to the heart of it. So many of these patients had been explicitly told by their doctors that diet didn't matter for their condition, but their own lived experience completely challenged that advice. It just shows you the potential disconnect between conventional wisdom and what's actually possible. Okay, so after digging into the physiology, the history, and some of this really compelling new evidence, let's pull all these threads together. What does this all actually mean for us? What's the big picture? First off, we've got to be clear about something. Low carb isn't just one diet, it's a whole spectrum. A ketogenic diet, for example, is a very low carbohydrate approach, usually less than 10% of your daily energy. That's a world away from just a moderate reduction. The really profound effects we've been talking about, they really only kick in at the very low end of this scale.
So, let's just boil it all down. 1. Our bodies are designed for a super tight glucose balance, about 1 teaspoon's worth. 2. Our modern diet and eating patterns absolutely shatter that balance, leading to chronically high insulin. 3. This high insulin, this hyperinsulinemia, might actually be what causes insulin resistance in the first place. 4. This isn't some new fad idea, it's a rediscovery of an old historical approach to health. And finally, as those IBD cases suggest, tackling the insulin problem might have incredible benefits far beyond just managing blood sugar.
And that leaves us with this one big question to chew on. We live in this age of amazing medical technology. We have smart pumps, incredible new drugs, advanced surgeries. But what if one of the most powerful tools we have for fixing the chronic diseases of our time isn't some future invention, but a piece of forgotten wisdom? What if the key is just changing what we eat, and maybe, just as important, how often we eat?